Please be seated. Welcome to another episode of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Teacher Certification course. We're glad to see everybody here today, all the young men that are present and all the old men too. So it's great that you're here. We want to invite you back to every class of the Peaceful Solution. The next one will be on 3/2/2022, which is on Wednesday evening at 5:30, and we invite everyone then also. I'd like to remind you we are in the character unit on the overhead. I'm showing that. Yep, the character unit right there. Or, I'm sorry, the self-control unit. I've got the character unit with me, as we should have. If you remember, we do go back and forth between the books and review a few things. So the self-control book is what we're in. This is one of my most liked books. I think most of us, knowing that self-control is the foundation of a positive moral character, you've got to have it to put these traits to work in your life. So I think it's all of us really have really taken hold of the self-control unit. So Catan ended up on page 20. I believe he finished the whole thing, and we'll be on 21. Let's do a really, really short review to kind of set up this class. In fact, let's just look at page 20 to just remind us where we left off at. Now, the title of page 20 is To Do or Not to Do, and that is the question. Self-control, of course, is the answer. And on page 4, which we'll be going back to from time to time, but page 4, it says the question of the day is, what is self-control? And if you look down to the last bullet point down there, self-control is the foundation of moral behavior. Now, it's the foundation of moral behavior, but even for self-control, you've got to know the positive moral character traits that you would use your self-control with, So we'll go into that a little bit. All right, another important aspect, back to page 20, another important aspect of proper decision-making is learning to weigh your options. And of course, it has the scales of justice there. Weighing your options means taking the time to consider the possible outcomes of each choice before acting. Now, that's quite a responsibility, to weigh each choice, not every now and then when you just kind of feel like it and say, oh yeah, I ought to be weighing this, That's how it starts, it kind of comes a little bit here and a little bit there, but we should be doing it all the time. It should be becoming, as we get more involved in the Peaceful Solution and as we're training to be teachers, it should be becoming more normal to us, as our first choice. It should be, I guess some could say habit, but it should be our normal way of doing things. Anyway, if you look down just a little bit, it's talking about, it gives a scenario. Jason was on his way to class. The hallway was crowded as everyone rushed for the late bell, and suddenly someone pushed him to the floor. And of course, he was embarrassed and he felt angry, like most of us would be to some degree. And he thought to himself at first, I can't believe some dumb jerk pushed me down. Or I can't believe some dumb jerk just passed me on the right-hand side of the road. Or I can't believe some dumb jerk. I mean, you could come up with all these things that pop into our head from time to time. Now, as he thought about it, though, yeah, but I really can't prove who pushed me down, and it could have been an accident, and besides, trying to retaliate is not going to make things better. It's going to be worse. So he thought about it, and he made the right choice before letting his actions take hold. If I find out someone did it on purpose, I'll report it. That way he can be corrected. And that's the right thing to do. Now, the thing is that once Jason reports this to an authority, you know what? He's done with it. He's done his job. He's reported it to the authority and let the authority deal with it. The authority's not going to call Jason and say, hey, Jason, we've got this guy in here. Now he's the one that pushed you. Come on down here and we'll let you see us flog him in public. That's not going to occur. And that's what we have to remember, too, when we're dealing with people and we have an issue and we're using the peaceful solution and we report the situation to an authority. Our job is done. It's over with. We shouldn't be standing around looking to see, what occurs and if he gets a beating or how bad his punishment's going to be for what he did to me. That's not the way to go. It's a tough thing to do, though. You got to kind of get it right. Right now, if you look at the headlines, people are wanting to see what they call justice. Justice must be done. And that's what leads the politicians and the authorities that be to do the things they do, is because they want to be accepted in the eyes of the people. And if they just sit back and they call on the phone, hey, Vlad, I want to talk to you here for a minute, and hey, can we get along here? Let's just talk. And the people don't see that, and it's not reported on and everything, or even if they did, they're not going to want that. They want to see some blood. They want to see some correction take place, some punishment, Let's get over there and bomb those guys. They want what they call justice, but that's not justice at all. In fact, the only way you can have justice is with the peaceful solution. True justice will come with the teaching of the peaceful solution and everybody learning to get along together in unity with these great moral principles. Okay, I think we can move on to page 21 now. Before we do that, let's go look at our lesson plan, okay? Now, I looked at it earlier, of course, because I'm teaching the class tonight, and I hope some of y'all did too, so you could be aware. We're going to be combining these two on lesson plan 1, page F. We've got procedures 7 and 8, and we'll be hopefully combining the two if we get through all the way tonight through what I have learned, which I hope we do. So tell students you are going to give them a tool to help them remember to practice self-control. We love this tool, by the way. Write the letters of the word S-T-O-P vertically on the board. Okay, so S-T-O-P, all right. And instruct students to read the section entitled Putting It All Together. It's found on page 21. And then we're going to complete the activity like it says. And this is going to allow us to practice recognizing negative thoughts and practicing self-control in order to avoid these negative feelings and actions. First you have a thought, then you have a feeling, then the actions come, and then we've got to sit back and look, oh no, is it a reward or consequences, And so that's where we go. You might not see that reward or the consequences right away either, and that's where people get fooled. They get deceived into believing they got by with something, Okay, and then in procedure 8, it says conclude the lesson by having students turn to page 24 in their handbooks and read the section What I've Learned, which we're going to do tonight, hopefully. Tell students that they are now accountable for their actions because you know what? You've learned something. You have some knowledge now, and you're accountable to put it to work in your life and develop this positive moral character. It's up to each and every one of us to remember to practice self-control in every aspect of our lives. So in putting it all together, back on page 21 is where we're starting. Putting it all together. You are now aware of the harmful effects of negative thoughts, which if we remember the previous classes, William just got through, not last week, but the week before, he just got through with several of the pages leading up to this point, and then Catan, a couple classes that he did. And so we're going to be ending this chapter very shortly here, possibly even tonight. And so you're aware now of these harmful effects of negative thoughts, and when faced with a negative thought, let's just look at page 15 real quick about the negative thought thing, okay? Now, up at the top it says think about it. Because your mind is your most powerful tool, that we don't want it to get rusty and everything, right? We want to be using it and keep it sharp. The one needed for all tasks, And it must be properly cared for if it is to function at its best. Think of it like this. Your job is to build a house, but your saw is useless because it's been left out in the rain, and having rusted, it's now too dull to cut the wood. Now, listen to this. Negative thoughts have the potential to affect your mind in much the same way that the rain can corrode the metal. Think about that for a minute. I mean, who in their right mind would leave their electric saw out in the rain, or even a hand saw out in the rain? I mean, it's going to rust up and you won't be able to cut the wood. You have to sand the rust off of it and try to get it back into shape and be taking a lot of supplements and everything to fix your brain. Think about these things. Think about how it works, man. So negative thoughts have the potential to affect your mind in the same way. Negative thoughts wear away your ability to make choices that are moral and respectful to yourself and others. I'm going to repeat that. Negative thoughts, okay? Negative thoughts wear away your ability to make choices that are moral and respectful to yourself and others. It wears it away. So it would seem that we would want to keep negative thoughts out of our mind, right? In knowing that, if we really believe it. If you don't believe it, I mean, who cares? Go ahead, have your negative thoughts, and your mind will waste away, and you won't develop this great moral character, and you'll be out there, fighting for the Ukraine, or fighting for Russia, or fighting for the Republicans, or fighting for the Democrats, or whatever else you want to come up with. That's a wasted mind. Negative thoughts will wear away your ability to make right choices. Let's go back to page 21. So, when you're faced with negative thoughts about yourself or others, this is your cue. And no, I'm not talking about a stick to hit balls around with on a table. It's a signal for an action. It's your cue. A cue is a signal for you to take action, to do something. It's like a trigger, like something that clicks in your brain and says, okay, man, I remember this. I need to do this. It's your cue to start practicing self-control. And the first thing you need to do, I love this part. The first thing you need to do is here where I wrote stop on the board vertically behind me right here. You got to stop. You have to think, and you have to think about how this can affect you or someone else. You have to think. And remember, the negative thoughts do wear out your ability to think properly. They can set you up to fail. Negative thoughts about others have the potential to lead to violent and aggressive behavior. And if nothing else, you can join in murdering them. When you talk about somebody behind their back and try to ruin their reputation with someone else, you are practicing murder in every aspect of it. What if that person goes home and they just can't stand all the embarrassment and pain and everything of something that was said about them, even if it was true, and they go home and kill themselves? What do you think about that? And then it comes back to you. What will you think about that? You need to think about these things. We have to evaluate our options. Stop, think, consider our options, S-T-O. Stop, think, options, consider them. And we know now the difference between a positive and negative choice and how to weigh our choices. We know how to do it, but now we have to learn to practice it in our lives. And remember, a choice is only positive if it is moral and shows concern. Now, what's a positive choice? One that's not going to harm you, it's not going to harm others, and it's not going to harm property or the environment. So you can't say, well, I'm making a positive choice. I didn't hurt nobody. I just went and tore down their mailbox. No, that doesn't work that way. Or, well, I didn't hurt nobody. I just had me a doobie over here. I just thought I'd smoke a joint, and I'm just doing this by myself, watching cartoons. What's the problem? Well, it is a problem because everything you do has an effect on others, has an effect on the entire world. You just don't know it yet. There's a ripple effect to every action that we take. Negative choices can be immoral, and now that you know the value of positive choices, you can proceed, thus the S-T-O-P on my board back here, see it? S-T-O-P, stop, think, options, proceed. You can proceed by making a positive choice and following through on your decision. An easy way to remember how to practice self-control is to think of the acronym STOP. S-T-O-P, like a stop sign, right? I mean, look, right here. Overhead, please. Stop, think, options, proceed. You know, see how it's shaped like a stop sign? Everybody's seen stop signs before. It's an easy way to think about it. And if you really want to change your life and help change others around you, you'll have this in your mind. All right, let's go ahead and turn over to page 22. Now, on page 22, we're going to look at one of these scenarios here. It says to read the following scenarios and answer the questions that follow. Now, in the setting that we're in tonight, it's not quite the same as having a small classroom setting. This is more of a speech venue, kind of. So let's start out with Jamul. I think I pronounced that right. I might not have. But he was one of the last boys to be chosen for the debate team. And Jamul thought to himself, and think about it for a minute. If you've ever been chosen for any kind of team and you were chosen last, it's not a great feeling, you know. It's really not. And most of us have probably been there. I don't see any of you guys that you know, look like Wilt Chamberlain or some of these other sports guys out there, you know. So you might have been chosen last on a team. I know I was before. So, but he started thinking to himself, nobody likes me. I hate debate. Even though he was there to sign up for the debate team, right? Now all of a sudden he hates it. Nobody likes me. I hate this. You know, I mean, really, is he being positive or negative? And you know, to use self-control, what would he do? Well, he would have to gain control of his thoughts and realize that his thoughts are negative and he's being his own critic, which is one of the most harmful things we can do. It leads to self-consciousness. It leads to self-defeating actions. It leads to not having any, I don't know, the word confidence comes to mind, but any acceptance and belief in yourself, you know, it leads to these things. Let's look at number B, letter B. If Jamul does not practice self-control, what could be some of his negative options? Well, he could choose not to participate in the debate like we were talking about. I hate debate now. Or if he did get chosen at another time, he might not perform properly because he would have those negatives in his mind. You know, I remember last time they didn't pick me. I must be the worst ever. And you start having that self-defeating attitude and you can actually make it come to life. It would be better not to go there. If Jamul practiced self-control, what could be some of his positive options? Well, he could participate and perform to the best of his ability, showing that he is a worthy teammate. You know, a team. That's what it is, a team. That's what we forget sometimes, is that we're talking about a team, everybody working together, you know. It's not one person, you know, out there hot dogging, you know, being the number one guy. Blah, blah, blah. You know, it's not him. He would have nothing. He would have no protection. He wouldn't have any option of doing that if it weren't for the rest of the people on the team. He could not handle being the one person against all these other people. In a debate, in a ball game, in anything, in life in general, in a business. You know, a business isn't going to, Elon Musk didn't get to where he's at just by himself. You know, he had people behind him, people that he chose and put in place, and other people chose other people, and that's how he's gotten to where he's at. Part of it, you know, there's a lot of other variables, but he didn't do it on his own, and nor does anybody else. Even with the peaceful solution, you can't just go out and do it on your own. You can pick up this book and read it and go out and try to do it on your own all you want. But until you have teachers to teach the peaceful solution, to help guide you through these things, to help you make proper decisions, to be there to answer your questions if you're wondering, is this a right decision according to the peaceful solution or a wrong one? Am I hurting myself or others? Maybe I should get some more advice. So one person doesn't do it all. It's a team. What positive option do you think Jamul should proceed with? Well, of course, he should control his thoughts, practice self-control, and keep his thoughts positive, right? And then there's another scenario, Monica and her sister, and she got upset and so forth. And so you can read that for yourself. We need to move on to page 24, if you will. This is what I've learned. Now, in what I've learned, we're going to be trying to finish up this chapter. And this is actually a review of some of the things that we have learned and talked about. Now, some of you might have notes from previous classes and so forth, and you've got those in your mind, you've got them in front of you, and I think a lot of us have some of the same notes and some of us have different notes. We all have our personalities. Hopefully we're all working towards the same character, but we all have our own personalities to deal with, right? And so we're going to have different notes along the way. But let's go ahead and look at the first bullet point. Now, self-control is the foundation of a positive character. Self-control is the foundation of a positive character. It's the foundation. It's what you must have to build upon. Okay? You've got to have it. Let's turn over to page 1 real quick. On page 1, this starts out and says, Chapter 1, that self-control starts with you. And it talks about how you think about yourself and others, and even if you've witnessed a toddler having a tantrum, then you know what a lack of self-control looks like. I've witnessed adults having tantrums. You can see that in people, and you can witness what a lack of self-control is. But in this first chapter, if you look down towards the bottom, the last paragraph, you'll learn what self-control is and why it is an important trait for everyone to acquire and practice on a consistent basis. Now, that's the thing that's hard to grasp and hard to teach. Doing it on a consistent basis. Everybody has times where you can, look at it and say, man, I really practiced that self-control that time, and be pleased that you did so. And then we all have times where we could look and say, oh man, I did not practice self-control in that situation. So as we go on and as we're learning and teaching, we want to try to limit those times where we didn't practice the self-control and increase the times that we did practice the self-control. All right, so learning to do it on a consistent basis, tough action, but you can do it. You will also learn that developing self-control begins with controlling your thoughts and making choices that are positive and moral. Self-control is the most important character trait you can develop. Now get this. Look at what it says. It says self-control is the most important character trait that you can develop. The word develop. Catch that word develop. Okay, I read the self-control book. I'm cool now. I'm ready to go. Well, no, it doesn't work like that. Developing means you put it into practice and it starts taking place in your life. And so that when a situation comes up and the pressure's on, you immediately revert to what you've learned in practicing self-control. If you're not practicing that self-control, and you just read it and come to class and read it, and and you're not practicing it in your life, then when a situation comes up which puts you under pressure, what are you going to revert to? You're going to revert to the last cartoon you watched, or the last video game you played, or the last, whatever you want to choose to that you mostly have in your life. We want to move away from that. We want to move away to what we mostly have in our life is positive moral character all around us by the people we're around, the people we work with, the people that we visit with or eat with, or we want it in our life everywhere we can get it, so that we revert to it in times of trouble, in times of pressure. But it's the most important character trait that you can develop because it applies to all aspects of your life, all aspects, and is the foundation of a positive character. It even applies to your life in the grocery store. You know, you went in there to get some toothpicks and you walk out with a basket of Fruit Loops and ice cream and whatever else for $120. You know, well, that's a little bit of lack of self-control. We got to think about what we're doing. You know, I'm exaggerating, of course, you know, but it's real and true. A lack of self-control can lead you into blowing your whole paycheck on foolishness rather than what you knew you had set up to do. So we have to develop, we have to use it in our life, and it grows and grows and grows, and that's what the developing is, okay? Developing a positive moral character and developing self-control. Let's turn to page 4. On page 4, it says, what is self-control? And so just speaking of it for a moment, controlling, that is guiding or directing what we think, because thoughts lead to feelings, that's so important. The thoughts and the feelings and the actions, you know, those thoughts, the way you think about it, you know, oh man, that smells like my mom's cookie, my mom's cookies in the kitchen. And you go back to this wonderful time. Hopefully, it might not be such a wonderful time in some people's lives. Or you smell a perfume or something and you think about somebody. Might be positive, might be negative. You know, we have to control those thoughts. And controlling what we feel, because the feelings lead to the actions. What are we going to do next? You know, are we going to get depressed and then have self-defeating actions take place in our life? Are we going to get angry and it's just not worth it, and go out and burn the tires off our car and terrorize everybody in the neighborhood, you know? I've seen that occur. I've seen people lose control of their feelings and go out and break every window in their car, including the windshield. Now, wasn't that a smart thing to do? Sure made them feel good at the moment, but when they sat back and looked at it the next day, they're like, oh, what an idiot, you know? So, controlling how you behave, because decisions lead to actions which lead to the rewards or consequences. And always remember, self-control is the foundation of moral behavior. You know, the foundation of moral behavior. We're going to hear in a minute where these moral principles you have to have even for self-control, to practice self-control properly. But when you practice self-control, you stop and carefully consider whether your thoughts and feelings will lead to actions that are morally correct and in your best interest and everybody else's best interest around you. Learning to develop and practice self-control on a consistent basis, remember, we said that's going to be a tough thing to do, and in all situations is a long-term process. No, you're not going to learn it overnight. And the first step in understanding self-control is to explore how it relates to morality. Okay, so we can't go through every portion of it. We're kind of hitting the highlights. Let's look at page 10 real quick. This is still going along with self-control being the foundation of a positive moral character. So, you know, throughout the book and throughout the chapter, you're going to be able to find where certain things are talked about. And each one of those things, every time it's mentioned, is going to have a little bit more understanding for our knowledge of what it is, so we can learn to put it to work in our life and develop this positive character trait. So remembering that self-control is the foundation of a moral behavior, self-control develops other traits. Developing, and practicing self-control will enable you to develop many other positive traits also. Self-control is the foundation of a positive character. For example, it takes self-control to be responsible. Responsible people complete all tasks to the best of their ability. Now, you know, remember, we have to give ourselves room to grow. Previous book, right? We have to give ourselves room to grow. We can't kick ourselves too hard every time that we fail at something. And when we do consider it a failure, we need to remember that a failure is only if we don't get up and keep on going. It's just a setback. It's just a curveball that was thrown your way, a little bit of a setback. Let's get over it, deal with it, and move on. Now, that's courage, and that's positive. That's not failure, okay? So responsible people complete all their tasks to the best of their ability, and this is where the practicing comes in. We're practicing to do that. Occasionally we're going to fail, but we got to kick it in gear, get back up, pull your boots up, bootstraps up, how they say. But they're willing to make sacrifices to fulfill their obligations. Now, this is where self-control really comes in. Willing to make sacrifices to fulfill their obligations, And we've read stories about people that, they were given the option to go to the park with their friends or go to the movies or something like that, but they had chores to do, and they decided, no, I told my dad I would do these chores, and I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm not going to go. I'll see you guys later. If I finish, maybe I can get with you or something. But rather than neglecting their duties, responsible people stop and consider what needs to be done, and then they make a positive choice. Now, here's the thing. In using self-control to do this, how are they going to make a positive choice if they don't know what positive choices are? Think about that for a minute. Self-control is the foundation of a positive moral character, but think about it a minute. You've got to have that knowledge. You've got to have that information. You have to have that power to go along with it. So you've got to know. We've got to know what positive character traits are, how we can use them in practicing self-control. If we didn't, we might think we were practicing self-control if we just said, you know what? Dad can do it himself. I'm going to go ahead and go to the movies. You've got to know what's right and what's wrong. And then, of course, values come into play. All of this is synergistic, It all works together. So responsible people complete all the tasks to the best of their ability. They're willing to make the sacrifices to fulfill their obligations. And rather than neglecting their duties, they stop and think and consider their options and proceed with the right choice. And they make positive choices to fulfill their obligations. It also takes self-control to be respectful, especially when someone is not respecting you. Wow. Is that not the hardest thing? Anybody, any hands out there? Is that a tough thing to do? I can tell you it's a tough thing to do. When you're being disrespected by somebody, man, you got to really suck it all up. Remember the peaceful solution. Remember what's positive and negative. Have those great moral values of wanting to be that person that's an example. And remember, when someone's disrespecting you, it's not an option for you to disrespect them. You're hurting yourself if you do. You're not hurting the other person. They'll go on about their business, but you are hurting yourself. If someone disrespects you, the easiest thing to do would be to get even and disrespect them in return. Sometimes people think getting even is, hiding behind the door and getting them when they come out or doing something behind their back or whatever. But that's not exactly what getting even is. Getting even is trying to put it back on a level playing field. Well, he just disrespected me. I'm going to tell him what he did wrong, and I'm going to tell him what I think about it, and he's going to get a piece of my mind, and that's going to settle this deal. That's part of getting even. We don't want to do that. So the easiest thing to do would be to get even and disrespect him in return. However, taking revenge is not showing self-control. Don't let that word revenge guide you off into thinking, you have to attack the person physically or something like that. That's part of it. But just the thing of throwing it back at them and telling them, well, you did this, all that's revenge. Self-control means to stop and consider that retaliation will lead to more disrespect, as we see right now in the news. Hate and animosity where you, the other person, and even innocent bystanders could die. They could get hurt mentally, physically. By becoming a person who has self-control, you'll be able to consider all these things and make the choice not to take revenge. Okay, we're going to have to move on a little bit here. The next bullet point is moral principles are the foundation of self-control. Now, wait a minute. Didn't I just say that self-control is the foundation of a positive character? All right, well, moral principles are the foundation of self-control. Let's explain. To practice self-control, you've got to stop and consider whether your thoughts and feelings will lead to actions that are morally correct. Remember, it's all synergistic. It all works together. We can look at page 14 in the character unit. I can give you a great example of what it's talking about here, of how you wouldn't even be able to practice self-control if you did not have this knowledge right here on these pages. Let me let you take a look at it on the overhead. Page 14 and 15 right here, the positive side of character and the positive character traits. And this is what you've got to have in your mind and in your heart. Remember, the peaceful solution changes the hearts and minds. You've got to have it in there so that when the time comes to practice self-control, you know what to choose. You know what to do. Instead of all the negatives we've been taught all our lives. Even the word respect is taught wrong, except for in the peaceful solution. Okay, so, and back on page 4, you can write this down. Back on page 4, well, let's look real quick. Back on page 4 in the self-control book. Remember, like where it says self-control is the foundation of the moral behavior, and what we're talking about now is that moral principles. Notice it doesn't say moral behavior is the foundation of self-control. No, the moral behavior is a result of self-control. You've got to have the moral principles that we just talked about on page 14 and 15 in the character unit in your head, in your heart, in your life to be able to practice self-control properly. What would you choose from if you didn't have that? Well, we could turn over to the negative traits and you'd be choosing from that probably. You'd be choosing from everything you've learned from all the negative people that know nothing about the peaceful solution and don't know much about any kind of, I can't say they don't know anything about self-control. Somebody, might be shooting at somebody and decide to use 1 bullet instead of 5. That's some self-control, but it's not positive. They're not using positive moral principles in their life, and their self-control is not producing, proper moral behavior. We've got to remember those things. You've got to have all these things in your life to put them to work. Let's look at the next bullet point. Developing and practicing self-control will enable me to develop many other positive character traits. Yes. Let's turn to page 8 real quick. Be aware of where these things are talked about in the books. That way you can take it off the shelf and actually put it to work in your life, and help others with it too. But on page 8, the real test of self-control is what you do when no one's looking. Isn't that the truth? The importance of self-control. Self-control is needed in every situation. And you need self-control. We need self-control whether we're alone or interacting with others at school, home, work, even when you're having fun. Self-control enables you to speak and behave appropriately. You have to have self-control and not to join in when people are making racist or sexual jokes and stuff like that. You've got to have self-control. You've got to be the one that stands up for what's right, And to know what's right, what do you have to have? You have to have the knowledge of those positive character traits, right? You have to have the knowledge of the peaceful solution. Peaceful solution is power. You now have the power to put that to work in your life. You now have the power to teach that to others. You have the power that you need to do it right. So self-control enables you to speak and behave appropriately regardless of the choices that are placed before you or the situation you're in. In fact, self-control is so important that it's probably one of the first character traits that you were taught how to develop. and it gives us this scenario. You can recall your parents reminding you, don't touch, don't run, that's hot, don't touch it, leave that alone. So they're constantly telling you, okay, don't do this, do that, don't do that. So by that you're learning from your parents, whether it was positive or negative, character traits they were teaching you at the time, but you learned that, and you learn to stop and, I know what's going to occur if I do that. Oh, I can't touch that, or I'm going to get a spanking, or, whatever else. Well, so you learned self-control, not the best way, of course, but you should learn through teaching. That's what we always want to be doing, is we want to be teaching. We want our children to learn not through the criticism and the punishment. We want them to learn through the teaching of great moral character. And by the way, our own example is one of the best teachers that could possibly be there, especially for children and children in the peaceful solution. Learning, just learning the peaceful solution. They look at all of us, all you sitting out here right now, they look at you as an example and see what you're doing. They see you doing something crazy, they might just throw it out the window. Now, is that right? No, it's not right. But think about what we've done to cause a ripple effect and to cause things to occur. When I say cause, we didn't force them to just throw it all away, but yet we might have influenced them negatively, and they made the wrong choice because they had no strength. They had no backbone, and they had no foundation in the peaceful solution. We have to think about those things. You learning to be teachers in the peaceful solution, you need to get that straight in your head really quick. We do. So, we learn these things as a child. We learn to practice some self-control along the way. And then, of course, with the peaceful solution, we can learn positive self-control. Look at the next bullet point. Self-control must come from within and must be practiced consistently, because I'm now accountable for my decisions and actions. By the way, in the last bullet point, knowing and developing are, of course, two different things. The knowing is the knowledge that we gain through reading, through teaching, and everything else. The developing is the thing that we have to choose to do. We have to make the choice to develop this in our life. We have to take it off the shelf. We have to use it. That's what develops it in our life. We can know it, and it doesn't matter nothing about it. You have to develop it in your life. You have to practice that self-control when you want to talk about somebody, when you want to hit somebody, when you want to attack somebody, when you want to retaliate in anything you do. You have to take that hard choice and practice that self-control. You got to suck it up and not fight back. So, once you know these positive character traits, you've got to develop it using that self-control. And let's go to page 9 real quick. Page 9. So now that you're growing up, it's up to you to take, and we're all growing up still, even me. I know I look pretty old, but we're still growing up, okay? It's up to you to take responsibility for keeping yourself in control. You can no longer expect your parents and teachers to remind you of the proper behavior. Come on, you got to, at some point, step out there and do it on your own. You've got to take responsibility. That's another great positive moral character trait that we can learn through self-control. Take that responsibility. No one's going to be standing over you all the time saying, okay, do this, do that. Now, you might have that voice back in your head of a teacher saying, do this, do that, or a class you went to where it's saying, do this, do that. Remember self-control, remember moral values, remember, those things might pop into your mind, which we hope they do. And that will be your memory, that will be that voice telling you to do that, instead of the one you heard on the TV or on the video games telling you to pop him in the face or shoot him or fight back or don't let him dish you like that. You're a man, aren't you? Get away from that. So in other words, we're now accountable. You should be able to distinguish between right and wrong, and we are now accountable. You get that? I just read it to you. If you've come this far in this program, you are now accountable. You're accountable because you have that knowledge. If you choose not to put it to work in your life and develop it, then that's you doing that. Nobody can help you. Knowledge is power. The decisions you make, how you behave, how you treat others. Man, how you treat others. You know, in the Peaceful Solution, we should all be thinking unity. I was told by the author of the Peaceful Solution that you've got to have friends. You need to be working to have friends, not enemies. We need to think about how we're treating others in everything we do, what we're saying to them, what we're saying about them, what we're saying to others about them, even to authority. Do we go to the authority and with the intent in our heart of doing harm and malice? Or do we go to the authority with the intent that, man, I hope they can say something to him and to help me further learn how to handle this situation? That's the right type of heart to have with the Peaceful Solution. If you're going with intent in your heart for harm or malice or to get back or to see somebody punished, you haven't got this yet. And you are accountable for your actions. It says so right here. If you've made it to this point, you are accountable. I'm accountable. We're all accountable. Not accountable, accountable. I hope none of you are cannibals. So even though you've been developing self-control through the guidance of adults and teachers in your life, it's up to you to determine to practice self-control of your own free will. Now we better turn back over to page 24 real quick. On page 9, we just covered it also. It's up to us to determine if our thoughts can help us build my character or if they can lead to choices that we will regret. That's also covered on page 9. Let's read it real quick. The big paragraph there where it starts out with self-control must come from within you and must be practiced consistently. Remember that. And you must be willing to guide and direct your thoughts and feelings and actions at all times. If you jump on down just a little bit, self-control is what you do when no one is watching. And as you'll see later on in this unit, people who allow themselves to lose self-control even once in their life could find themselves in situations that they regret for life. And I do know people, a lot of people, that have done things and they regretted it all their life. I know a young man that at 14 years old committed a double murder. He has regretted it the rest of his life because he was tried as an adult, and that's where he remains even to this day. We had the great opportunity to meet the young man with the Peaceful Solution teachers when we went out to some of the prisons, and you know, everyone in prison that I've ever talked to that was learning the Peaceful Solution, they all said, if only I would have known these things, if only I would have made the right decision. The next bullet point says I have the power to control which thoughts I focus on and which ones I let go. If you turn to page 11, you need to learn to guard your mind. Another key concept in developing self-control is to be aware that your actions begin with your thoughts. It's easy to say, I just did it and I wasn't thinking, but the truth is, really, guys, everybody out there, the truth is we're always thinking. You know, split-second thoughts going through our mind quicker than lightning, just all the time. There's no time you're not thinking. While you've been sitting here in this building tonight, and those of you online, there has been no time that you were not thinking about something. So you can't say you weren't thinking. Yes, you were. And it's up to you to determine if your thoughts can help you build your character or if they lead to choices that you will regret. In the last paragraph, it says, how do you know if your thoughts are positive or negative? Well, negative thoughts are hateful, revengeful, and selfish. And the selfish is a thing to remember. You know, selfish is wanting to see somebody get punished. Selfish is wanting to know that you were right. Well, I was right and he was wrong. You know, that shows him. No, it doesn't. We need to remember that. Let's look at the next bullet point. In practicing self-control, I must take the time to weigh the consequences of my choices. Weighing the consequences of our choices. We can sit here right now tonight and we can all think of choices that we've made that we had horrible consequences come our way. Is there anybody here that can raise their hand and say any different? Show me if there is. I'd like to see it. No, there's nobody. So we have to take the time to weigh the consequences of the choices that we make, but let's do it before we make the choice. That is what, back here on my board, stop, think, options, proceed, right? That's what that's about. It's stopping and thinking about those possible consequences or rewards that could come our way, and the option that we can take to have it come out to the benefit of everybody. So page 16, it's a matter of choice. The next important step in developing self-control is understanding the role of choices in the way we think, feel, and act. A choice is the power to make a selection between one or more options. Yes, you have choices. Nobody's going to force you to do it. People try to force you, but even if they hold a gun to your head and call it force, it's really a choice. You choose whether to do it or not do it. Not do it and die by the hand of the gun, or choose to do it and know that you died doing the right thing, whichever way it goes. So a choice is the power to make a selection, and we all have that power to make the selections. And every day we make choices, and we're the ones who choose what thoughts to focus on. We're the ones that choose to focus on complaining about how we feel, complaining about the weather, complaining about our money, complaining about the book we just read, complaining about the teacher last night, complaining about how cold it is on our feet, complaining about, I could go on and on and on. We can make a choice of doing that, but that's just negatives that, again, are wearing your brain out so you can't think properly. If you think in that manner and remember that, then you can make right choices in your brain to sharpen your mind and help you to develop this positive moral character and this self-control so that we can treat others the way we want to be treated ourselves. Let's look at page 20 real quick. I think we have time. Page 20 is kind of where we started out tonight. Catan went over this in the last class. And just remember, to do or not to do, self-control is the answer. And remember, self-control is the foundation of moral behavior. And remember when we said back up there in the second bullet point on what we've learned, where it says moral principles are the foundation of self-control. Wait a minute. Self-control is the foundation of positive character. Wait, moral principles are the foundation of self-control. Well, it sounds a little twisted, doesn't it? But remember, those moral principles are those positive character traits that we want to learn and have that knowledge of in our life, so that self-control, we know how to practice that self-control, the right choices to make, and it will be our foundation of that positive moral character. So let's remember that. Remember page 20. We've already read it. We've already been through the next pages all the way to what I've learned. And the last bullet point is I can use the STOP acronym. For those of you that came in late or signed on with us late, I drew on my board back here, S-T-O-P. Stop. Stop, think, consider your options, and proceed. And think of that stop sign on the road, that red stop sign with the white letters. What does it say? S-T-O-P. Stop, think, options, proceed. And that's what we're doing. That's what self-control is about. We want to weigh these options. Turn to page 21, where we started our current lesson for tonight, and it's putting it all together. You are now aware of the harmful effects of negative thoughts. When faced with a negative thought about yourself or others, what are you going to do? That's your cue. That's your signal. That's your signal for action. That's your cue when you start thinking negative about somebody. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it right there. Stop right there. That's your signal to start thinking something positive about that person. What can you think positive? Remember the old saying, if you can't say something great about somebody, don't say nothing at all? That's absolutely true. And it's not because it's gonna hurt them, it's because it's gonna hurt you. When you talk negative about somebody else, you're only hurting yourself. You're not hurting them. You're sitting there drinking a glass of poison, waiting for them to die, like a numbo. You can't, that doesn't work like that. So all of us need to remember, every one of us need to remember that we want to put this to work in our life, develop this great positive moral character. How do we develop it? By practicing it, by putting it to work, by taking the book off the shelf and thinking about what we're doing each and every day. You don't develop it by coming here and sitting in the class and going home and putting the book away and not thinking again about it until next week. That's not how you develop self-control. That's not how you develop positive moral character. You develop it by practicing it to where it becomes that first nature, where it becomes, habit, if you want to use that word habit. It becomes your way. You become a man or a woman or a child of integrity. That's what we're all looking to do. If you'd like, there's some other activities that you can do. I highly encourage you on page 25 to keep a self-control journal. You can write down when you mess up and when you do it right, and you can look back at it at the end of the day. So, and whatever else goes along with it, these are activities that you could possibly do. There's actually on page 26 and 27 some great word puzzles, to help you remember some of the words along the way, some of those great moral character traits, and so that they can pop into your mind as time goes on. And it's been really great being with you here tonight and being able to help myself learn and to help others learn how to practice the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. And I hope we can all go out throughout the week and develop this great positive moral character and this self-control in our lives. And so our next class is going to be on 3/2/2022, which is on Wednesday evening at 5:30. We look forward to seeing you here again. I hope you can all make it, and others out there that are watching online, thanks for coming. And we hope you can put this to work in your life too. There's many things for you. There's books available for you online. There's books that you can order if you'd like to have the hard copy. And so just remember all that, and let's treat each other right, okay? Thank you very much for coming.